to Alan's Italy. Tonight, I think we have a really great show for you because um, it's going to be related to a book that I got as a gift. This is the book that I got from my friend Luca Roloni, who works at the Hotel Croce di Malta. And he gave me this book because I've admired photos that he had in his home related to photos taken by the Alinari brothers, who were pioneers in the art of photography in the 19th century. And I've decided to base tonight's show on this book, so just wanted to show you that. But before we do that, let me go to this. This is what the show is going to be called, Florence Then and Now, and I'm going to talk about the photos from the 19th century of various places in Florence, and then I'm going to show you the modern photograph, compare the two, and talk a little bit about how Florence has changed over the past 150 years. But first, we go back to Susan Chalkley, who you might remember from last week when we did a video interview of her at the Villa La Palagina in Foligno Valdarno, Italy, where we stayed overnight while visiting my friend Luca. And Susan sent me an email telling me that she's going to be having a show starting on the 21st of June, which was yesterday, and continuing until October 30th. And it's going to be some of her beautiful work. And she asked me to kind of publicize it for her, and I was, of course, pleased and delighted to do that. So if you're going to be in Florence or in Italy around that time, and you'd like to see some beautiful art, and perhaps even stay at this beautiful villa, then please, feel free to do that. Okay, so that's one thing. And to Susan, we wish her the very best of luck. The second thing I'd like to mention is related to Andrea Martellini, who's the spokesperson for the Five-Star Movement in Italy. This is a picture of him and I, of him and me, during just before the interview. And this is the insignia from Woodstock. That this was a festival that they had last September of 2010, and the Woodstock insignia is there. And after the show last week, I'd realized that I hadn't mentioned something about, Woodstock. I mean, here I am living in Woodstock, and he's using, his movement is using this symbol, which is really interesting because we all love living in Woodstock, and of course, we're famous for the community that we have, which is wonderful, but we're also famous for the concert in 1969 that didn't really happen here. It happened about an hour and a half south of here in Bethel Woods. But, Woodstock is a symbol of alternate realities and change and doing things in a different way. That's what Woodstock has become known for. So this was very nice that I was able to go there, and he mentions to me that this is what they're doing, and very, very interesting. Anyway, again, to Andrea and his movement, the best of luck to you. Tonight's show starts out at a museum that Laura and I have visited many, many times over the years. This is one of our favorite museums in Florence. And it's a museum that is not very well known in Florence, and most tourists who go there kind of don't go there. So when you go to the Fratelli Alinari Museum of the History of Photography, you're kind of alone in this magnificent space that has two parts to it. One is a permanent collection, which is marvelous, with things related to the history of photography. And the other thing is, a current exhibition, which we actually missed. They were just taking it down when we got there, on the day we got there. So we wandered around and took pictures of the permanent collection, which are really astounding and amazing. And I'd like to go through that with you before I actually get into the other part of the show. So this is the museum. And it's located in a beautiful loggia that's right next to where the hotel is located, the Hotel Croce di Malta, on Via della Scala, although this museum is not located on the Via della Scala. It's actually located right on the Piazza Santa Maria Novella. And there's a map. And let me just show you that the hotel, well, I got that thing in the middle, but the hotel is right over here, and the museum is right here, so it's kind of right next to it. And it's in a great location. And if you ever take a day trip to Florence, certainly there's the station right there. And it's only, as you can see, a 10-minute walk and probably a 10-second walk from the Church of Santa Maria Novella, in a great location. These are the Alinari brothers, and they created a photography studio known as the Fratelli. Fratelli means brothers. The Fratelli Alinari Studios, which is the world's oldest photography firm, founded in Florence in 1852 by Leopoldo, who's the fellow in the middle, and Giuseppe and Romualdo. These are the brothers, and they created this incredible firm that currently possesses 5.5 million photos. And I'd like to show you some of the things that we saw in the museum when we went. It's really quite a place. This is one of the very first negatives that were ever taken by the Alinari brothers. This is one of the things that you see when you go to the museum. And there's another very old negative. This is Nadar. Nadar was one of the pioneers in photography. He was French, and his claim to fame, among other things, was that he created a hot air balloon which would hover over the countryside, and he took the first aerial photographs that were ever taken in the world. And most of the photographs that he took were of French venues, mostly of Paris. And there were none that we could see in the Alinari Museum in Florence, because they're probably all in France. But I just thought I'd mention Nadar. And Farania was a studio which photographed, people for, as you could see in that particular photograph, for weddings and events of that type. These are some of the negatives that, these are from the Alinari collection. So these are some of the negatives that existed in the mid-19th century. This is part of what Laura explains to me as stereoscopic photography, which creates, it goes into one of those viewers. I have some viewers that are coming up soon, which gives you a three-dimensional image. So this is an example of the Arch of Titus that appears in the Roman Forum in Rome. And, if you look through the viewer, I don't know if you've ever seen one of these, but if you look through the viewer, you actually see a three-dimensional image. And people loved this at the time. This was like really, really unique. This is some of the paper that was used in the mid-19th century. And of course, this is an old sign from the old Kodak Corporation that we all know very well from our childhood. Another well-known photography venue, manufacturing company, Agfa. Farania, yet another one. This was taken by Julia Margaret Cameron, who's a very, very famous female photographer who began doing her photography in the 1860s when she was 48 years old. Apparently, her daughter gave her a camera, and she decided to become a photographer. And she became very well connected to many famous British notables, namely Darwin, and she was actually the neighbor of Alfred Lord Tennyson. And she was, of course, British, and she only did her work for 11 years, but she did a lot of work. One of the things she did was to dress up well-known actors. This is the actor Sir Henry Taylor, and he dressed up as Rembrandt, and she took a picture of this, and this became, of course, a very, very popular mode of photography in England during the mid-19th century. This is a photograph that was I found at the Alinari Museum. This is Mount Blanc, and this type of photography was really extraordinary because for the average person who did not know photography and was not able to get around to very famous places throughout the world, this is quite an amazing thing to be able to see what Mount Blanc looks like and to see what it looks like scaling the heights of Mount Blanc. This is a photograph of the Duomo in the town of Como on Lake Como from the mid-19th century. This is a view from Paris. And this is called, let me get this right, a megalotoscope that was invented by a fellow named Carlo Ponti in 1870, and it was used for with larger format lenses to observe photographs with different lighting effects, such as transparencies and with different types of lighting. These are some of the early. This is the stereoscope that you put those dual images and you see 3D photography through it. Actually, we have one at home that Laura's family uses to see family photographs. This is an old camera, and here are some more. We took a few pictures of some of the oldest photography. This is a very, very old reel-to-reel motion picture camera. This is one of the oldest Polaroids. It says it right on the front there, Polaroid land camera from many years ago. And then they have just lineups of old cameras going through the years. These are not 19th century cameras. These are more advanced than that. And these are some of the equipment that's used to create beautiful photography. Here are some more cameras. Some of them you may recognize. I'm 64, so some of these really ring a bell. I had a camera once with a giant flash attachment that I thought was the cat's meow at the time. Here's another camera. And photographs were and are used in a lot of different situations. This is a photographic album, a very elaborate photographic album that was used in the past. Here's another one. And this was a very unique experience for people who could, use photographs in a lot of different ways. These are paperweights. This is a king and a queen on their linen. So this is, was used by them. This is photographs on glasses, on china, on instruments. These were all in the Alinari Museum. Here's another example of how photography was used in the 19th century. This is, kind of a funky use of tin cans to create a camera. Amazing pictures. I'm personally, one of my interests is the American Civil War, and of course the photography of Brady and a few others were groundbreaking at the time. And now we come to tonight's show, which is, Florence then and now. And I'm beginning with the modern photograph of the Piazza San Firenze. This is one of my favorite piazzas in Florence. And I'm not sure exactly why, to tell you the truth. It's not the prettiest piazza that I've ever seen. Off to the left is the Church of San Firenze, and then going counterclockwise, we have the very recognizable Bargello Museum, which is known now as a great sculpture museum that I've mentioned on a couple of shows. And then, as the street that's coming down towards us is the Via Proconsolo. The church steeple that's very high over there is the Badia Fiorentina, which is one of the oldest churches in Florence, a 10th century um, church, and then peeking out from the top there is the dome of the cathedral. And then you can see in the piazza there are cars on the right and stalls on the left that sell a variety of things, with a divider down there in the middle. And this is, kind of a dangerous piazza. This is not pedestrian free as many of the piazzas in Florence are. So this is the way it looked recently. I mean, this is either the photograph we took during our recent trip in 2012 or the previous trip in 2010. This is the photography of the same exact spot that was taken in the 19th century. And you could see that it looks pretty much the way it looked 150 years later. You could see the steps of the Church of San Firenze over there on the right. The Bargello is, there it is. The Via Proconsolo is there with the Badia and the dome of the cathedral peeking out from the top. So, the photograph that we took was a good choice because obviously this was a very, very popular location to take a photograph of. Of course, you'll see many differences. For example, on the left, you see that there are cars, automobiles. I think this photo actually comes from the 1930s. So those are cars from that era. There are trolley tracks down the street, and the electrical wires above. This is it's not a strictly pedestrian street because you see there's a car coming down there, a car or a horse-drawn vehicle, I'm not sure, but it was certainly a little safer to walk around then than it is now. But this is the Piazza San Firenze, and this is a comparison of what it looked like in the 19th century and what it looks like now for you to get a really interesting perspective on Florence then and now. In this case, the Piazza San Firenze. This is the most famous piazza in Florence. This is the Piazza della Signoria, and one of my favorite piazzas, and you can see the evocative sights of the Palazzo Vecchio on the left and the Uffizi sticking out right next to it, and the Loggia dei Lanza with the famous sculpture on the right side, and lots of people in the piazza. And one of the things I'd like you to focus on is almost to the center, possibly to the slight left there, is the statue, the copy of David. The statue of David by Michelangelo stood in that spot from 1504 to 1873. So for 369 years, there was always a statue of David right in front of the Palazzo Vecchio. This is the same exact spot. It's a little different view, as you could see. This was taken a little further back from the spot that we actually took it. But you could see that the piazza looks essentially the same, with the Loggia dei Lanza, with the Palazzo Vecchio, and with the Uffizi sticking out from between. There are horse-drawn vehicles on the left side waiting to take people to various venues. And of course, the dress of the people is a bit different. It's obviously not pedestrian-free because I see some vehicles in there. But there's one notable difference, and if you look very closely at the Palazzo Vecchio, where where you're used to seeing David standing, David is not there. The reason for this is that in the year 1873, it was deemed impossible to keep David, the original David by Michelangelo, in that spot. So they moved it inside to the Galleria Accademia, which is where it is now. And it wasn't until 1910 that a copy was made of the original and put in the spot that it now occupies. So again, now this is a view of the piazza looking towards the other way. So when you look at it over here, you could see that the piazza, they give you a more huge expanse of what that looked like. And this gives you a view of what the part that we kind of left out looks like now. Now on the left side, there are a lot of restaurants. Okay, but now here is the Piazza della Signoria then and now. And if you look closely again, there's David on the right, the copy of David, and on the left, no David at all. So this is during the only period of 37 years. During the previous 600 years that there has not been a statue of David in front of the Palazzo Vecchio. I found this comparison to be remarkable, and I hope you did as well. This is the church of Santa Croce. This is the Piazza Santa Croce, as we took it. And it's very interesting because there's the statue of Dante off on the left side. As you look at the photograph, on the left side is the statue of Dante. He's not buried in the church as many other Florentine notables are, including Galileo and Machiavelli, and of course Michelangelo as you walk in on the extreme right-hand side. And this has always been a very, very lively piazza. And this is the way it looked in the 19th century. And you'll find one very, very interesting difference. The statue of Dante is right in the middle of the piazza. And I found this remarkable, a little crazy, because they do have soccer matches there now. And this would be a pretty big obstruction if you had a soccer match, right in the middle there with Dante, his statue right there. But one of the things that I really found interesting is in this photo, as opposed to the one that we took, you see the campanile right there on the right side, the bell tower on the right side of the church, and of course the Pazzi Chapel, the very famous Pazzi Chapel that was designed by Brunelleschi. In our photograph, you don't see it that well. I'll show you the comparison. This is the Piazza Santa Croce then and now, and you could see that from our angle, you don't quite get the Pazzi Chapel. You could just kind of see it peeking out there. But from this angle, you could certainly see that the statue of Dante has been moved to its current location, which is on the left side of the church. And now the piazza is completely free for soccer matches and any other things that take place. Now, I do remember reading that in the 15th century, the Medicis sponsored jousts that took place, medieval jousts. So I'm not sure that Dante was actually in that location during the 15th century, because that would be very difficult to have a joust with this giant statue right there in the middle. This is the church of Santa Maria Novella, one of my favorite piazzas, right next to the hotel, right near the hotel that we stay in, Croce di Malta, and right next to the hotel of the Hotel Minerva, which is the hotel you see over there on the left side. And this is one of my favorite piazzas, and this is the way it looked in the 19th century. Essentially the same. I'm not sure the Hotel Minerva was over there on the left side. I was trying to look at the name of the building over there, and it doesn't look like Minerva, so I'm not sure if it was or it wasn't. But it looks pretty much the same, except that now the piazza is a pedestrian, rather a traffic-free zone. Not pedestrian-free. It's a pedestrians only. So if I said that before, I didn't mean that. Of course, I meant traffic-free zone. And you also see that there's a tram over there on the lower right-hand side, which obviously doesn't exist anymore. Horse-drawn vehicles right in the middle of the piazza. And here's the Piazza Santa Maria Novella then and now. And it's essentially the same, other than, the pedestrian zone that now exists. This is one of the great piazzas in Florence. This is the Piazza della Repubblica, which is a really great place to hang out. We've spent a lot of time here, and you can see off to the left there is a carousel. There are tents always set up with fairs and things being sold, and this is very, very lively and very exciting piazza to be in. But in the 19th century, this is not, of course, what it looked like. There's a good view of it with the carousel over there on the left, and looking straight at the Via Strozzi, which is the street you come to when you walk through that arch. This is a good view of my favorite carousel in the world, probably. I've never been on this, but I do have a dream of someday bringing my granddaughter on that. So this is a photograph of the piazza as it looked in the 19th century. I believe this photograph is from 1860. And this was a slum back in the 1860s. And you can see there's a loggia over there, mid-photograph on the left side. And that loggia will come prominently into play in just a few minutes when I get to it. But this is what it looked like in the 1860s. And here's another view of it in the 1860s. It was known as a market. It was called the Old Market. And this is a view of the piazza looking to the northeast towards the cathedral and the campanile. Here's another view of it in the 19th century, and this you can see, very, very clearly the loggia over there on the left side. And this is what the piazza looked like after 1870. Now, what happened in 1870 was that Italy unified. So all the city-states that existed prior to this time were unified into the Italian Republic that it's currently known as today. And Victor Emmanuel was the unifying force, and Florence was selected as the place where the capital of the country would take place. And they wanted to create a brand new piazza that would be just a showpiece for all the dignitaries that would be coming into Florence because it was now the capital. And they created this brand new piazza with the arch, and they cleaned up the slums, and they made the piazza look kind of very similar to what it looks like today. And there is the view of it as it looked right after the 1870s and what it looks like now. And you could see that it's kind of very similar to the way it looked back at that time. Now, as I said, one of the things that I would like to focus on is the loggia. This is the loggia that existed in the Piazza Repubblica before it was cleaned up. And one of the things that they loved about this loggia was that it was beautiful, as you could see, and it was designed by Vasari. So he was very famous in the 16th century as the court painter for the Medici family. And they didn't want to just dismantle this and throw away the pieces. So they decided to take it apart and then build it all over again in a different location. And they found this piazza. This is the Piazza del Ciompi, which is located. We actually came across this loggia on our way to the synagogue of Florence, which is in the northern part of the Centro district. And this is a beautiful loggia that we photographed, and we didn't know the history of it. It was my friend Luca who actually turned me on to how this came about. This is what it looks like now. They sometimes have modern art kinds of exhibitions here. And this is a very lively piazza now and a very, very beautiful loggia. And here is the Ponte Vecchio, which is the bridge that was built many hundreds of years ago, I believe in the 13th century, but I cannot verify that for sure. I'm not totally sure. But this is a view looking east towards the bridge, the Ponte alla Grazie. And if you look over there on the left side, you see a little peek of what the Uffizi looked like back then. Here it is right over here, the Uffizi. Here's the Vasari corridor right up here, which I mentioned earlier in one of the earlier shows. And this is the exact same spot right now. And this is not an anomaly. You're saying, wow, this is like really crowded with people. But this is the way it always is. The Ponte Vecchio, except at night, is just crowded with people. Not only people who are staying in Florence, but people who are, just coming for the day. And I was kind of waiting for the crowds to abate somewhat, but they never did. So I took this photograph, and of course, the comparison is really extraordinary, because on the left you could see that these are just a few people just hanging out at this really cool spot. I mean, when Florence gets really warm, which it is right now, my friends in Italy are now telling me, this is a nice kind of cool spot to hang out because you get the breezes coming from the river. And there's, the archways you see over there are also in existence on the other side of the bridge, so you get a nice breeze. But, right now it was like very, very crowded with pedestrians. Here's the Duomo, the cathedral, and you get a very nice view of the cathedral with the campanile over there on the right side, and you also get a view of the dome of the cathedral. And we're going to spend a few minutes now talking about this. The cathedral was started in 1296 on the design of Arnolfo di Cambio, and this is a very nice view not only of the campanile and the dome of the cathedral with the facade of the cathedral, but also of the baptistry over there on the left side. This was taken from the Via Calzaiuolo, which is a very wonderful street, which you'll see in a few minutes. This is the modern view, and this is the view of the cathedral taken from a higher vantage point than the one I just showed you. And one of the interesting things about this cathedral that you're looking at now is that the facade is incomplete. So in 1864, so remember that the cathedral was begun in 1296 and then was finished, it was consecrated in 1436. So after 140 years, it was finally consecrated. And from 1436 to 1864, imagine that, 428 years it took for the city to get around to actually completing the facade. It was finished. Well, it was begun in 1876 and finished in 1877. It was designed by Emilio di Fabri in 1871 and, of course, begun in 1876. So this is the facade as it looked, let's say, prior to the 1870s. And this is what the Piazza del Duomo with the facade of the cathedral and how it looked later than the 1870s, because this is, a little further on, taken by the Alinari brothers. And of course, here's the comparison, the facade as it was unfinished for the all those years, and then the finished facade. And here is the cathedral looking again west from the Via Ceritani, which is a slightly different view from the one I showed you earlier. And there's the facade as it looked prior to 1877, after 1877, and the modern view of that same exact spot from a slightly different vantage point. So the cathedral then and the cathedral now. This is another view of the piazza as it looks looking from Via Calzaiuolo back in the 19th century. You can see that it's crowded and there's a lot of horse-drawn vehicles. And this is the exact same, almost the exact same view right now. And you can see that it looks pretty different. Of course, people wear shorts now and capri pants, and it's pretty much of a pedestrian zone right now. There are a few emergency vehicles that tend to drive around. You have to be careful. But this is almost what it looked like looking from the north, looking from the south, looking to the north. So this is the Piazza del Duomo looking north from Via Calzaiuolo. And this is what the Via Calzaiuolo looks like looking south, going towards the Piazza della Signoria. This is a view of the cathedral, which I could not get a modern view, believe it or not. I could not get a modern view of the cathedral. And we're trying to use only photos that we've taken nowadays, so we certainly did not take this. I don't know, this was taken obviously from above, and I'm not sure exactly from where it was taken, but this is a great view of the baptistry over there on the lower right-hand corner, the campanile, the cathedral, the facade, and the dome of the cathedral, all in one photograph from the 19th century. This is not the same vantage point by any means, but just to show you what it looked like as a modern view. We took this photograph from the top of the hotel that we stay in. And this is another photograph from that same vantage point at the top of the hotel. This is the Piazza della Signoria, as taken from the, let me get this right now, the northwest corner, looking at the piazza, the Palazzo Vecchio, um, the Uffizi and the Loggia dei Lanza. This is the piazza looking from the, I'm really challenging myself here, from the southeast. Okay, so this is looking from the southeast towards the piazza with the Loggia dei Lanza on the left side. There's a better view of the Loggia dei Lanza, and as you can see, this is a very crowded spot. And this is the way it looked, almost from the same exact point of view, in the 19th century. And the notable difference is the lack of crowds. And there's mostly men. Whenever you see these photographs, you always see a lot of men, and they're all wearing hats. And I guess men. In the 19th century, the men were out there doing whatever they do, and the women were at home. Now, some of the sculptures on the Loggia dei Lanza have been changed, but I believe that the one you see on the left side, which is the statue of Perseus, is the same exact one. And this is the Piazza della Signoria from the southeast corner, then and now. This is the church and the piazza of Santa Maria del Carmine, which is one of my favorite churches in Florence. It's not one of my favorite piazzas, as you could see. We'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. But this church is known more for something called the Brancacci Chapel. And this was completed in the it was actually started in the early 15th century, not completed until the later 15th century. It was started by Masaccio, it was continued by Mazzolino, and finally finished in the latter part of the century by Filippino Lippi. And this was groundbreaking for its time, and this is one of the great art venues in Florence, the Brancacci Chapel. And that's the reason that people go mostly to the Church of the Carmine. And this is what the piazza looks like nowadays. Not a very pretty piazza. It's now really a parking lot, although there is a little restaurant over there, an outdoor restaurant on the left side. But this is what the church looked like in the 19th century. And the church pretty much looks the same. And the notable difference, of course, is the fact that it is not now a parking lot. So I would like to have seen it back then. A day in Florence, you find a magic lantern, you rub the lantern, and for me, one of the wishes would be that I could go back to Florence in the 19th century. Actually, I'd like to go back in the 19th, 18th, 17th, 16th, 15th, and 14th. Not during one of the plagues, though. That would be pretty dangerous. But this is what the piazza looked like then and now. This is taken from the Ponte alla Grazie, the Alla Grazie bridge, looking to the west. And the street where the cars are now located is called the Lungarno Generale Armando Diaz, who's a very famous Italian general, who in the year 1917, when the Austrians had defeated the Italians, this was during World War I, he rallied the troops and, staved off disaster. He lived from 1861 to 1928, and they named the Lungarno, all streets along the Arno are called Lungarni, and this is one of them. This is the way it looked, almost from the same exact point of view in the 19th century, when it was not called the Lungarno Diaz, but was called the Lungarno della Borsa, named after the Palazzo Borsa over there on the right side. And this is, again, from the Ponte alla Grazie, looking to the northwest, almost from the same point of view, down the Arno River. Whoops, place the wrong one. Well, this is the old picture of the Piazzale Michelangelo, which was very interesting because it's one of the two copies of David in Florence. And when I do a tour, as I told you earlier, when I do a tour for people of the city of Florence, I always start at this spot because it gives you an extraordinary view of Florence. This is the modern picture. And you can see that David is faced right towards the city, as it should be. And the only building that you can distinguish from this photo is the photo of the synagogue over on the right side. Other than that, nothing is really distinguishable except the city of Fiesole up on the hill there. And again, here's the Piazzale Michelangelo, then and now. And you could see, one of the things you cannot see is that this Piazzale is now a parking lot, basically. Cars, and I, have parked there myself. Tour buses and many, many cars come up here to get the advantage of seeing this incredible view. And that's what it looked like then and now. This is the then picture of the Piazza Santissima Annunziata in Florence. This is a beautiful Renaissance piazza that was designed by Brunelleschi. And this is what it looks like now. And we'll see the comparison in just a moment. The piazza is actually not, it's known for the fact that Brunelleschi designed it, but it's known mostly for this building. This building is called the Ospedale degli Innocenti, which was a founding hospital in which orphans were put into, believe it or not, kind of like a mailbox. Like people who wanted to give up their children to adoption would come at night, and there was kind of like this pull-out mailbox that they would put the children in, and then the next morning the nuns would, I think it's called a foundling hospital, would take care of the children. So this became an orphanage, and that's what the piazza is really known for. This beautiful building designed by Brunelleschi. Here's another view of the piazza, looking at the church, and this is what the piazza looked like in the 19th century and what it looks like now. And of course, it looks pretty much the same, except that you're not seeing motorized vehicles. There you're seeing horse-drawn vehicles, but it pretty much looks the same. It's not the same vantage point, so you're not getting the exact same view. This is one of the most dangerous places in Florence. This is a view of the train station, Stazione Santa Maria Novella. Now, if you're standing where I'm standing taking this picture, and you're looking towards the train station, I actually took this picture. I don't think Laura took this picture. I think I was the one that took this picture. And this is pretty scary because if you want to get to the train station, it's very dangerous to cross the train station at this exact location because you could be pretty well maimed by one of the vehicles that speeds around this, like at breakneck speeds. It's terrible. But you would take one of these underground passages. This is what you would do. If you were trying to get from one side to the other nowadays, you would go through this underground arcade that has stores on either side, and this is the way to do it. And back in the 1930s, this is the way you did it. You just basically strolled peacefully and relaxed without worrying about the motorized vehicles across the piazza, and that's the way it looked in the 1930s. The Piazza della Stazione, then and now. It looked pretty nice back then. This is the entrance to the underground passageway that I spoke about earlier. But the view that I'm giving you here is really the view of the Church of Santa Maria Novella from the Piazza Unità Italiana. This is looking at the church from the east, I believe. And this is what it looked like in the 19th century. Notice the absence of the underground passageway, which was obviously not needed then because it was not treacherous cutting across the Piazza Stazione. And this is what the Piazza dell'Unità Italiana looks like, looking west to the Santa Maria Novella, looking to the west, taken from the east side of this piazza. And it looks pretty much the same as it did back then. This is the underground passageway that you would take to get to that other side. This is the church of San Lorenzo. This is the Piazza San Lorenzo. You can see there's one stall over there on the left, but there are many, many more stalls over there on the right because this is the very famous San Lorenzo market, which is one of the biggest markets in Florence. And back in the 19th century, this is what it looked like. And you could see that there were a few stalls, and there was a market, but it was nowhere near as big as it is now. And they actually permitted some of the stalls to actually prop itself up against the facade of the cathedral. Not the cathedral, but the church. There's only one cathedral, that's the Santa Maria della Fiore, the Duomo. But this is the way the piazza looked like in the 19th century and what it looks like today. Notice the facade was unfinished then, and it's still unfinished. Michelangelo did a design of a new facade which was never started. The model of the facade is in the, I believe, Museum of the Duomo. I'm not totally sure that it's either in the Museum of the Duomo or in the Casa Buonarroti. We'll find out for the next time. But that's what it looked like. This is the Mercato Nuovo. This used to be a grain market and has now been turned into a market, which you could see that's what it looks like. Back in the 19th century, with the tracks for the trolley. This is what it looks like today. It's now one of the biggest market venues in all of Florence, a place where Laura and I have frequented and made a few purchases over the years. This is what it looks like. It's very crowded. Everybody loves this one. Even though it's smaller than the San Lorenzo market and a bit crowded, it's very, very pleasant to go shopping here. The Mercato Nuovo, the new market, then and now. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the show. I enjoyed very much bringing it to you, and I hope you enjoyed seeing photographs of what Florence looked like in the 19th century and how it looked, now in the 21st century. Thank you for watching, and buonanotte e buona fortuna.